Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries and Ferocious Feline Productions. In our years together, I've done a few videos on the Salem witch trials, but I ran across some new information that's never been discussed, and I thought it was only right that I brought this whole new story, including the scientific explanations, supposed explanations, of what caused these fits in these young girls that brought about these trials. Check this out. This is good.
Was it really magic that caused chaos in this town? Imagine getting a court summons because someone you know suddenly got sick with a mysterious illness that doctors can't explain. The Salem witch trials of 1692 are one of America's darkest chapters. A strange illness spread through a village, and the people started blaming one another. Accusations of witchcraft led to rumors, lies, and eventually, many executions by hanging. But was it truly magic that caused this chaos? What sins had these people committed, and were those executed really witches? Let's dive in. Salem is a town in Essex County, Massachusetts. Back then, in 1629, it was a brand new settlement. By the 1690s, it was home to a group called the Puritans. These were deeply religious people who followed strict religious practices. The Puritans were English Protestants who wanted to purify the church by removing what they saw as influences of the Roman Catholic Church. In 1641, America was still made up of English colonies, and one of the laws at the time declared anything related to witchcraft illegal. It was considered a serious crime. According to these laws, a person proven guilty of minor witchcraft offenses could face 1 year in prison. If they were caught practicing witchcraft again, the punishment was death. In English tradition, a confession backed by other evidence and testimony from 2 reliable witnesses was seen as solid proof. In 1688, there was a woman named Martha Goodwin. She had an argument with a laundress named Goody Glover. After the fight, Martha suddenly got sick with strange symptoms. Back then, no one had seen or heard of a sickness like this before. Martha started screaming, having seizures, and acting very strangely. Even worse, her illness seemed to spread to her siblings. Word about Martha's strange illness spread around Salem, and the townspeople believed the only explanation was witchcraft. They thought someone had cast a spell on her. When asked if she had recently had problems with anyone, Martha mentioned Goody Glover. The townspeople reported Glover to the authorities, and soon after, she was arrested. Glover was pressured to confess to using witchcraft to harm Martha and her siblings. She was told that if she didn't admit it, she would be hanged. Out of fear, Glover confessed, thinking that doing so might spare her life and send her to prison instead. However, even after confessing, Glover was executed. 4 years later, in February 1692, something similar happened to 2 young girls in Salem. These children were the daughter and niece of a minister named Samuel Parris. One day, Reverend Parris left his 9-year-old daughter Betty and 11-year-old niece Abigail alone at home. They weren't entirely alone, because during that time, slavery was still practiced in America. Reverend Parris had an enslaved servant named Tituba, who was taking care of Betty and Abigail while he was away. So, here's the story. Tituba was taking care of 2 kids, Abigail and Barry. Since the kids were bored, she decided to play a game with them. Back then, the Puritans in Salem were super strict and religious. They had a rule that kids weren't allowed to play games or do anything fun. Life in Salem was really quiet, no music, no parties, no markets, nothing entertaining at all. To pass the time, Tituba introduced them to a game called Venus Glass. In this game, you drop egg whites into water and watch the shapes they form. People believed the shapes could predict your future, like who you'd marry or what might happen to you. When Abigail and Barry played, they saw something terrifying. The shape looked like a coffin. Not long after that, during a freezing winter, Abigail and Barry got sick. Their symptoms were strange, similar to what had happened to Martha earlier. They started having seizures, screaming, throwing things, making weird noises, and crawling on the floor. They also complained about feeling like their bodies were being pricked with needles. A doctor named William Griggs was called to check on them, but he had no idea what was causing their illness. Soon, other girls in town, like in Putnam Jr., and a few others, started showing the same symptoms. Since no one could explain what was happening, the townsfolk began to believe that witchcraft was to blame. As more children fell ill, the fear grew, and the situation escalated. Eventually, the town decided to bring the matter to court. This marked the beginning of the infamous Salem witch trials. The court worked like this: if someone noticed an unexplained death or a strange illness that even doctors couldn't figure out, they would report it to a local judge. If the judge thought the report seemed believable, they'd issue an order to arrest the accused person, who would then face a public interrogation. These public interrogations were intense, aimed at forcing the accused to confess to being a witch. After the interrogation, the case would go to a higher court where witnesses would testify in front of a grand jury. One of the first accused people was Tituba. She had played a game called Venus Glass with two girls, Barry and Abigail, and someone claimed to have seen her feeding a witch cake to a dog. Tituba was brought to court and asked if she was a witch or if she had bewitched Barry and Abigail. She was pressured with many questions until she finally confessed to being a witch, likely to avoid harsher punishment. Confessing was a key part of the Salem witch trials. If someone admitted they were a witch, they could get a lighter sentence, like prison. But if they denied it and maintained their innocence, they risked being sentenced to death. After Tituba's confession, chaos erupted. Many people were accused of being witches, sometimes for petty reasons. For example, Sarah Osborne was accused simply because she didn't go to church regularly. The accused would be interrogated for days, often declared guilty, and then imprisoned. The trials spiraled into a frenzy of accusations, leading to many imprisonments and executions. On June 2, 1692, a court led by Chief Justice William Stoughton began its proceedings. One of the first people brought to trial was Bridget Bishop. Why was she accused of being a witch? Bridget was seen as someone who didn't follow the strict lifestyle of the Puritans. For instance, she liked to wear black clothing and other outfits considered strange at the time. One of the things that convinced people she was a witch was when she cut her coat into two pieces, which they thought was immoral and proof of witchcraft. Because of this, Bridget was tried, found guilty the same day, and hanged on June 10, 1692. After her execution, the trials paused briefly while advice was sought from influential people in New England, but nothing changed. From June 30th to early July, the grand jury convicted 5 more women. On July 19th, Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, Susanna Martin, Sarah Wilds, and Rebecca Nurse were executed by hanging. A month later, 5 more people faced the same fate, and the following month, the court issued 18 more guilty verdicts. On September 19, 1692, the trials saw a male accused of witchcraft, a rare case, as most of the accused were women. His name was Giles Corey. As usual, Giles was pressured in court to confess to being a witch. He refused, insisting, "I've never practiced witchcraft, and I don't understand why I'm being accused." Despite repeated attempts to force a confession, Giles remained firm. Frustrated by his defiance, the court ordered a brutal punishment called
peine forte et dure.
This involved placing heavy stones on the accused body, adding more weight over time to force a confession. Giles, however, never gave in. He died under the crushing weight of the stones, maintaining his innocence until the end. Historically, at least 172 people were accused of being witches during the Salem witch trials. Out of these, 19 were executed by hanging, and 1, Giles Corey, died under the weight of the stones. Tituba, the first person accused in the Salem witch trials, was actually a slave working for Reverend Sam. Even though her case started the whole witch trial chaos, she was eventually pardoned or released on bail along with some others who were declared innocent. This shows how unpredictable the trials were. Whether someone was guilty or innocent often depended on the judge's personal beliefs rather than solid evidence. One big mystery from the Salem witch trials is what caused the strange illnesses in the children of Salem. Their bizarre symptoms were the spark for all the accusations and executions. For years, people have struggled to explain what happened. Some still believe real witches lived in Salem and used their magic to harm others. Even today, Salem is often called the Witch City and has become a tourist destination because of its dark history. However, modern scientists think the children's strange behavior might have been caused by a toxic fungus called Claviceps purpurea, which can grow on grains like wheat during cold winters. This fungus can cause symptoms like choking, vomiting, and even hallucinations, which could explain what happened. Other theories suggest the children may have had medical conditions like Lyme disease or epilepsy, combined with intense psychological stress from their strict, highly religious environment, which forbid fun and enjoyment. The Salem witch trials remain controversial because so many innocent people were accused and executed without proper evidence. When historians looked into the root causes, they discovered tensions between two prominent families in Salem, the conservative Putnam family, who were traditional farmers, and the more liberal Proctor family, who ran a sawmill. Their rivalry might have played a role in the accusations, as many victims had conflicts with the Putnams. In 1672, a dam owned by the Porter family broke, flooding the farmland of the Putnam family. The Putnams sued the Porters for the damages caused. This led to serious tension between the two families since farmland and its fertility were crucial at the time. People believed the Putnams took advantage of the legal system to eliminate their enemies. This is because 8 members of the Putnam family were involved as accusers or part of the group judging the accused witches. Many of the people who were accused and executed turned out to be individuals who had disputes or problems with the Putnams. By September 1692, after several executions, the number of children falling sick began to decrease. This might have been due to the change in seasons. Around this time, people started realizing something was wrong with the witch trials. They questioned the fairness of the trials, noticing that many of the accusers and witnesses were connected to the judges or the Putnam family. Finally, in 1693, the Salem witch trials were officially stopped, and the remaining prisoners were released and cleared of all charges. The Salem court later apologized and compensated the victims' families. On the 300th anniversary of the trials, a memorial was built to honor those who lost their lives after being accused of witchcraft. The Salem witch trials are remembered as a dark period in American history. Ironically, the town of Salem has since become a popular tourist destination because of this grim chapter in its past. And that is the story of the Salem witch trials.
Welcome back. You know, it's like I was saying in the beginning, I've done a few videos on the trials. What caused them, what the end result was. But to get those scientific explanations of what could have been happening was totally new material to me, and I thought it only right to share it with you. Of course, they talk about the medical, scientific issues that could have caused these fits. But what about the previous beliefs that these girls acted up? It was all an act. So nobody expected them to do anything. No kid likes to do chores. And when you're in a time period such as this, what says they weren't just acting and putting the blame on somebody else so they didn't have to go out and work the fields and work the animals and everything else that they were responsible to do? Once these trials began and these girls went to court and they were acting out and they were having their seizures and all this, they didn't have to do anything except lay back and try to get better. And of course, public consensus and the courts figured the only way they were going to get better was to imprison these people, try them, and execute. Were there real witches in Salem? Or were these just innocent people that other people didn't understand or didn't like? What about the theory of the people accusing them being related to the local sheriff who, it's been said, on the day these people were imprisoned, the local sheriff impounded and took custody of their homes, their land, and all their belongings? Sounds to me like one family was getting very rich. And history even shows that one family were major landholders, had huge numbers of impounded possessions, and a lot of new homes to sell. What do you think? Were there really witches in Salem? Or was this just a fluke of spoiled children? Or maybe even an actual ailment? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you. God love you. We do. And we'll see you out there.